Rahim. On behalf of the Managing Committee of Toronto Baraza Group, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our Zoom session with Dr. Liyakat Takim. I'll start with a short surah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العظيم. This is an hour-long program. Dr. Takim will talk for about half an hour or so, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. We have a moderator, Hasnain Karim, who has been assisting with managing the technology, the backroom, managing questions and all that. So Hasnain, do you want to give us the other rules, housekeeping, whatever else we have?
Assalamu alaikum everybody, and thank you Nazmul Bhai. So basically what I'm suggesting is if you have any questions, you can either raise your hand or type here in the chat window, or you can also wave, or also you can, during the Q&A session, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask questions. So I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you, Hasnain. Also, this session is being recorded, so it will be available later on for viewing, and those who can't make the session today. Before proceeding further, I would also like to thank Takim, who has been kind enough to allow us to use his Zoom platform. So all the previous sessions, plus today's sessions, and hopefully in the future as well, we will be using his session. So thank you so much, Taki. Not sure if he's online or not. Dr. Liyakat Takim, well, it really doesn't need any introduction. He is well known not only in Toronto but worldwide in our Khoja community. But I think, in all fairness, I mean, his bio is extensive. I will just give you a very, very abridged version in 2 minutes. Professor Liyakat Takim is the Sharjah Chair in Global Islam at McMaster University here in Canada. A prolific writer and speaker, he has authored numerous scholarly works. He has written on a wide range of topics, including Reformation in Islam, the role of custom in shaping Islamic law, Islam in the Western diaspora, Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic mystical tradition, Islamophobia, the treatment of women in Islamic law, and the list goes on and on and on. I mean, he is a prolific writer and a speaker. Professor Takim has also spoken at many national and international conferences around the world. He has published 3 books and is now working on his 4th, Ijtihad and Reformation in Islam. Professor Takim has taught at several universities and is actively engaged in dialogue with other faith communities. With that brief introduction, Dr. Takim, the floor is yours.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله. Thank you, Najmul, for that very lengthy and kind introduction. Actually, as you were speaking, I realized that although I have written about the treatment of women in Islamic law, next time I will write on the mistreatment of women in Islamic law, because there are quite a few issues there that which need to be addressed. But in any case, that is for another occasion. I wrote a book which was published in 2009 called Sheism in America. It's widely available now. Excuse me. But as I was writing this, I was talking about the presence of the Shia community in America, the historical presence and some of the current features of Shiism in America. But of course, a key component of the Shia community is the youth. And that got me thinking about some of the challenges, some of the issues that faces the youth community. To start with, I think we should be talking to the youth rather than about the youth. Many a time we end up talking about them rather than with them or to them. Another challenge I think that we need to understand is what I call the immigrant Islam phenomenon. Basically what this means is that over the past number of years, especially since the 1980s, I would say, that more and more immigrants migrated to the West, to Canada, to America, to England, and so on. For whatever reason, some of them being for educational reasons, some of them because they had issues in their home countries. But once they came to the West, they established what we may call homesick mosques. Homesick mosques means because they were felt homesick, they established centers of worship where they felt that they could connect with people of their own ethnic background. And there's nothing wrong in that, by the way. We all do that. It's not only us Muslims. The Greeks have done it, the Irish have done it, Catholics have done it, and the Italians have done it, and so on. The problem, one of the main problem I can foresee is that because we have established what we call ethnic mosques, there is very little connection between some of these mosques. So sometimes when you come to, for example, to Canada, this doesn't apply now because even the mosques are no longer accessible. But you have, for example, a Pakistani mosque, an Iranian mosque, or a Iraqi mosque. Somewhere along the line, you wonder if there is an Islamic mosque in between, because most of these mosques are divided along ethnic lines. The issue with immigrant Islam, as I call it, is this, that immigrant Islam, that is the Islam of those who are immigrants who migrated here, it universalizes the particular. By that I mean to say that anything which is alien to their understanding, that the immigrant understanding of Islam, the immigrants think is alien to Islam itself. To put it differently, they think that their Islam is the one and only proper expression of Islam. Hence, when they see another expression of Islam, even of Shia Islam, they are baffled. They think that it is wrong somehow. So consequently, we find that for many immigrants, and of course now things have changed, but at least in the early period, for many immigrants, resistance to dominant culture was equivalent to being more Islamic. In other words, the more un-American you are, the better Muslim you were. The more un-Canadian you are, the better Muslim you were. This was in the immigrants' understanding. To put it differently, the more cultural Muslim you are, the better you are. But the more you went along with the dominant community, which is North American, the less Muslim you are. But of course, that doesn't jive with the youth, because if you talk to the youth, you'll find that they talk North American, they wear North American, they speak North American, their language, the kind of food, etc. I remember some time back, one of the youths came up to me and he told me that my daddy wants me to go to Pakistan every summer. And I said, why does he want you to go to Pakistan every summer? He said, so that I can become a better Muslim, more Islamic by going to Pakistan. I said that he wants you to go to Pakistan, not so that you can become a better Muslim, but because you can become a better Pakistani. Because Islam does not reside in Pakistan. Islam resides in your heart, not on a piece of land. To be sure, as I said, we need to engage the youth rather than just talk about them. The youth, as I understand it, differentiate between de-Islamization and re-Islamization. And there is a very fine distinction that we need to understand between de-Islamization and re-Islamization. De-Islamization means to de-Islamize, to become less of a Muslim. In other words, to become distant from Islam. But that's not what the youth are looking for. The youth are looking for re-Islamization. In other words, this process of re-Islamization is to draw up new lines to emphasize the universal rather than the cultural Islam. The youth distinguish between our Islam and the Islam, what we call Islam Sunnati and Islam Haqiqi. They want the true understanding of Islam rather than the Sunnati, which is the traditional cultural Islam. The youth are also rejecting the ethnic Islam phenomenon because they feel alienated from fellow Muslim youth or from fellow Shia youth. We need to remember that these youth now are living in a post-ethnic world. Many of the parents are still living in an ethnic world because for us, our Islam is in our ethnic mosques. But the youth are very different. They integrate with fellow Muslims at the universities, at workplaces. They are also connecting with the youth on the social media. Consequently, they are looking for a different form of identity. They are deculturalizing Islam. As I said, they want a more global Islamic identity. They do not want an Islam which is linked to a given culture. And as I said, this de-ethnicization or deculturalization occurs on the social media, on the internet sites, in the universities, at workplaces. In the process, by the way, they also adopt a culture that they, that is the youth, are familiar with, which is the Canadian or North American culture. And there is nothing wrong with that, by the way. Because when we went to Africa, we adopted a lot of African culture. When Muslims went to Malaysia, they adopted Malaysian culture and so on. And I want to make it clear that I do not wish to sound negative. Neither do I need to sound pessimistic. A lot has changed because Muslims have been in the West now for a long period, especially since the 70s. But they, of course, they came to North America. The earliest Muslim, by the way, that we have on record who actually came to America was in 1513. Some Spanish guy who was brought on the Armada, Spanish Armada, which came with Christopher Columbus. So Islam has a very long history in America, and the earliest Shia immigrants that we know of came to the American shores in the 1880s. So Islam has a long history in North America. I think we also need to understand the perspective and the dilemmas facing the Muslim youth. Because as I mentioned, when they go to this ethnic mosque, they feel isolated from fellow youth from different ethnic communities. But that isolation is not only in the mosques. I teach in the universities. I've been teaching, alhamdulillah, for over 25 years now in universities. And what I've noticed, especially for the Shia youth, is how they become isolated even on campuses. Because there is an influx, more than influx, I would say, a heavy presence of the Salafi and Wahhabi groups on campuses. And the moment they know that you are a Shia, somehow you become isolated even from fellow Muslims. I have lectured in Tennessee, I have lectured in Miami, in Denver, now at McMaster. And as soon as they came to realize that I'm Shia, I found that many of the youths, not all of them, many of the youth isolated themselves from me, not because I'm a bad professor, but simply because I'm Shia. I was astonished, and so were my colleagues in Miami, where the students were telling themselves not to take my classes simply because I was Shia. Now, this is talk coming from a professor. You can imagine the dilemma of the Muslim youth. Therefore, on many campuses I have found, especially in Canada, the Shia youth have ended up forming their own Shia groups. And they are small in numbers because the Shia youths are much smaller in numbers than, for example, Sunni youths. So you have, for example, Ahlul Bayt group in University of Toronto, Thaqalain group in Michigan, and so on. The youths, to be sure, operate a two different world. The world of the universities and colleges and the world of the mosques. And those two are very different. Many of us, that is the parents now, are more empathetic towards the youth. But when we came initially, we could not understand them because they go to universities, they go to colleges, they are taught different subjects, and they are intellectually engaged. When they come to the mosque, there is only monologue. And a lot of what is delivered, and I'm not pinpointing any particular mosque here, I'm generalizing. A lot of the lectures delivered to the mosque simply do not jive with them at the intellectual level, at the level that they are used to. So we need to think that we need to realize that these youths now will just not accept anything which comes to them. They have been challenged to think, to reason. And yet in the mosque, when they come to the mosque, many times they are confronted with rituals or with lectures which, according to the youth, make less and less sense every day. I recall, by the way, just to give you an example, and this is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not only applicable for youth in the West. I was living in Iran in 2011. For 4 months, I went there for some research work. And I used to go to the Haram of Hazrat Masuma in Qom almost every evening for Maghrib and Isha. And I noticed one thing, that as soon as the prayers were over, a Maulana would go up on the mimbar, 80% of the crowd would leave, 80%, if not more. And when I sat through that lecture, I asked myself, if I was a modern Iranian youth, would I really want to hear what this Maulana is saying? To be honest, no. Because he kept quoting hadith, he kept quoting this verse and so on, but there was no connection with the real world or the real challenges that the modern youth faces. That's why I said that many youth feel that what is delivered in the mosques or what occurs in the mosque makes less sense day by day. In this book that I was referring to, Sheism in America, which I wrote, it took me about 9 years to write, from about 2000 to 2009 when it was published. I interviewed many youth, and what they were saying was this, that the emptiness of the mosques is because of the emptiness of the hearts and souls of the youth. They were telling me that you build big structures, big mosques for us, which is great. There's nothing wrong in that. But we're building the outside of the mosque without the inside of the mosque. In other words, we're not considering who it is that we are addressing. And because of that, we need to adjust not only the language, and most of us have actually adopted English now. We have adjusted the language, but not the substance of what is being delivered. As one youth said, and for this I remember distinctly, I had to go to Detroit and interview some youth, but one of the youth says that Islam is not about bleeding checks, not about bleeding chests and black and white turbans. Islam is not about bleeding chests and black and white turbans. It's more about role models. Can you see how the youth are thinking now? That Islam is more about role models. One thing that I've also noticed, when you hear some very good speakers, and I don't want to kind of pinpoint anyone in particular, but when you hear people like Dr. Sayyid Ammar Nakshwani, Brother Hasnain Rajbali, and a number of others, we find that the youth are willing to listen. It's not that they are rejecting Islam. And there are quite a few of these speakers who have come. They are willing to listen, but the right kind of message that is coming through. Not a message which sometimes just does not fit in to their psyche. I found also, and this is with all due respect, that we tend to send our youth to Qom to study. And again, I don't see a problem with that. But many a time when these youths come back from Qom, A, there is no place to fit them in, because where do they go? Where do they earn their living from? And B, many a time they come back with that Iranian mentality, which they have been accustomed to. And sometimes this does not connect well with the youth's mentality here. So sending the youth to Qom, to me, is only part of the solution, not the complete solution. We need these ulama or the scholars to be actually engaged in the universities, in the colleges here too. In other words, a match or a mixture, if you like, of what is taught in the East and what is in the West. I've studied in both places. I've studied in Qom and I've studied in the West. And I can assure you that the curriculum, the syllabus of what is taught in Qum, in Najaf, and I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm saying it's different from what is taught, the courses, the style, the method, the two are just not compatible. Hence, you find many a time that there are tensions between professors in the universities and the ulama from Qum. And that's not saying that one is right, the other one is wrong. It's just that they have different ways of approaching, different methodologies. And consequently, we find that many a time youths prefer to keep away from the mosque. And this also applies, by the way, to the girls or the females within the community. Our girls, young girls, are demanding to be a part of the community engagement, part of the decision-making process. They are active participants in colleges, in universities. But when they go to the mosque, they are not able to dialogue or interact. Many times they just put behind partitions and they are told that even your sauti, your voices are aura. Aura is that which is seductive. Somehow, when we men listen to our ladies, we lose track of our hormones, which this is what they seem to think. Another major issue that I think maybe we can discuss during the interaction time is something that I have spoken about, and you probably heard of it many, many times. But I think that we need to address it more seriously now. This is the question of the number of our youth that we are losing because they are marrying outside the community. We've all heard about it. But what are we doing about it? Until fairly recently, 25% of the marriages, the nikahs that I was doing and performing was with our youth marrying outside the community. Now, if somebody comes to accept Islam, ahlan wa sahlan, there's no problem with that. But many a time, instead of these youth coming into our community, they take our youth outside the community because they get married and then we hardly see our own youth. Unless, when a child is born or at marriage time or in Muharram, and that's about it. Now, I would say that that percentage of marrying outside the community, at least in my own instance, I do not know about other ulama, but in my instance, is about 35 to 40%. 35 to 40% of the marriages that I have performed recently are with our youth marrying outside. I just did one last week. It's all on Zoom, and I'm doing some more in the coming weeks. Traditionally, our matchmaking process also need to be re-examined. I remember one youth, again, this happened a long time ago, but it was very poignant and very clear. She told me that, "Uncle, I do not go to the mosque." And I asked, "Why don't you go?" Young girl. And she said, "I don't go because the mosque has become a matchmaking or fashion parade, whereby, prospective matchmakers and prospective girls are checked out to see, whether they can be matchmaked with somebody else." To the extent that this young girl told me that one matchmaking lady came and told her, "Tar wajan ketlu che," for those who don't understand Gujarati, means how much do you weigh? And mashallah, our youths are very clever. This young lady asked the matchmaker, says, "Pelakio ke tamaru wajan ketlu che," how much do you weigh, first of all? That kind of tells us that where the issues are, we do need to arrange proper supervised chaperone gatherings within the confines of the Sharia. I'm not saying that we break the Sharia, but within the confines of the Sharia, in order to get our youth to talk to and connect with each other. Now, this situation that I'm describing is even worse in smaller cities. Islam or Shia Islam does not reside in Toronto or in New York only. There are a lot of our youths, a lot of families living in places like Miami or Edmonton or even Saskatchewan, Los Angeles, Denver, and so on. And there are Shia communities in places that you cannot even think of, in Yellowknife, in Iqaluit, in the Tundra, and so on, that I know of. I know somebody, for those who know Canada, I know of one family that used to live in Pond Inlet. Pond Inlet is in Nunavut. Now that just gives you an idea of how widespread our community is. and why this issue that we need to connect our youth not only within one particular city, but throughout North America. This is where I would suggest that the role of Nasimco should come in. Many a time I find that, institutions, I don't want to be critical of them, but our North American institutions, the only thing they tell us is when the moon is sighted or when somebody dies or somebody getting married, and so on, or administrators of where to send your home's money. I think we can do a better job than that, a more productive role than that. Those, and I say this again without pinpointing at any particular figure, but I say it because I genuinely believe in it, that those who restrict the meeting of our youth don't quite realize the damage they are doing, not only to our youth, but our future generations. I'm looking at not only the next generation of youth, I'm looking at our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. If we do not allow them to connect with each other, we're not only losing our present generation, but future generation. And I always have told you many a time, for those who've heard me, that don't think 5, 10 years, think 20, 30 years down the road. Think about the future generation. Let me ask you, honestly, when was the last time we did a survey of the youth, of how many of our youth are marrying outside the community? I'm talking of a general North American survey of what are the issues confronting the youth. We can talk about it generally here and there, but the best way of knowing the issues, as I said, with talking with the youth, doing a survey of them. Then we can get a proper idea. And based on those statistics, then we can address the problem. We're not even having or don't even know the problem. How can we address it? How many of our youth are currently getting divorced? How many of our youth are marrying outside the community or are marrying Shias from different ethnic groups? Let us remind ourselves also that the youth think and act differently. The social media I'm referring to in particular has challenged how the youth see the world. Our world, yours and mine, we were brought up when there was no social media, there was no internet. We did not even know what Google means, correct? The only word we knew, for those who know cricket, is googly, but nothing Google. But that was our understanding, our limited understanding of the world.
But first you'll have to unlock your device.
Excuse me, I don't know why the phone said that. When the moment I said Google and it said got it. In any case then, the social media has challenged the youth to see not only others, but also their own ideals. And issues are now being brought up on the social media that we feel very uncomfortable talking about. But we, that is the parents, may feel uncomfortable talking about it, but the youth are discussing it. And if we don't address these issues, then we are alienating ourselves from the youth. I'm referring specifically, and I remember speaking about this a long time ago, and I was chastised and I was rebuked. And I told them, that was when I was the resident alim of the Toronto Jamaat. I told the people that I can see things that you don't see because I have access to the youth. Ideas of homosexuality, for example, gay marriages, transgender surgeries, we feel extremely uncomfortable even touching and broaching the subjects. But these are the realities confronting many of our youth today. And especially on issues regarding Islamic law. You may have thought that I was joking when I said regarding women in Islamic law, the treatment. And I said, no, we should be talking about the mistreatment. I wasn't joking. But I am of the firm opinion, my own research tells me, that a lot of our laws, especially when it comes to women, are actually the remnants, and I can prove this, the remnants of pre-Islamic laws. Our laws, by the way, are what we call endorsed laws, social laws I'm talking about, not the ibadat, the mu'amalat. Social laws are endorsed laws. Islam did not come with a clean slate. It adopted many of the laws which are pre-Islamic and accepted them because it worked for that time fine. So regarding women's laws, for example, whether women can be judges, for example, or women can lead prayers, or women, the custody of children, these were laws that were pre-Islamic, which Islam adopted. But Just because something is adopted does not mean that it's immutable and it cannot be changed. Many a time when we came to the culture that we are living in now, we may have adopted certain customary laws because they were within the confines of the Sharia. But many of these laws now need to be rethought, especially for those who are living in the West. Remember this much, and I'm almost finished now because my time is running short. Ijtihad, the word that we use commonly, Ijtihad not only allows us to think, but also asks us to rethink the law. Thinking is one thing, rethinking is another. Formulating a law is one thing, reformulating is another. And there's nothing wrong in reformulating the law. Because when you look at Islamic history, when you look at our own ulama, many a time they differed amongst themselves. They still do even today. But if you went to Kufa, the law was saying one thing. You went to Medina, it said another. Why? Because all of local custom made a difference to the kind of law. The law is not an abstract, my friends. It is connected to the community. If a law is abstract, is an ideal, it cannot connect with the people. It has to be connected with the people so that they can apply it in their own lives. When a youth, for example, is reading a certain fatwa, and by the way, everything now is on the internet. Everything is on the social media. So what I'm telling you is nothing personal or that only I have access to. All you need to use Sheikh Google, and it's all there. When a youth reads, for example, that is obligatory to save a Muslim life, but it's not necessary to save a non-Muslim life. That, you can save, but you don't have to. Now, when somebody is dying or needs help, I don't go and ask him, are you Muslim or non-Muslim? But when a youth reads that, can you imagine what he or she is going through? Or when they are confronted with a fatwa which says that it is okay to accept an organ from a non-Muslim, but you cannot give your organ to a non-Muslim, even if you don't need it. That it is okay, for example, to steal from kafir. Recently, and many of you may not even be aware of this, there was a big hoo-ha, a big controversy in Qom, of all places, in the seminary, in the Hausa. Why? Because, and I'll say this openly because it's on the internet now, because one scholar, Ayatollah Sayyid Kamal Haidari, most of us have not even heard of him, but you can Google him. He is now got his own website. Kamal Haidari said something. He said that most of our ulama, Shia ulama, believe that Sunnis are Muslims here in this world, but they are kafir in the next world. And that is true. He was saying the truth, by the way. A lot of our ulama, not all of them, but a lot of them have said it. Some of them still say it. In other words, they are Muslims zahiri, but not batini. In other words, in the next world, because they do not believe in the wilayat of the imams, they're all going to go to hell. Only Shias will go to heaven. This idea of kullu Shia Jannah is not new, by the way, and it's not a joke. But now, especially in this modern world, a lot of our laws are being rethought in Qom. Qom actually is a hotbed of what we may call an intellectual revolution. The question of, for example, when does a girl become baligh, whether a woman can inherit land. Traditionally, our ulama said that a wife cannot inherit the land of her husband. She can inherit the house, but not the land in which the house is. So I don't know, the house is floating about in the air. That women cannot become women cannot become judges and so on. That women are naqisul aql, that is, they're deficient in their thinking. All these laws now are being rethought and revamped. The question of custody to the children and so on. Finally, excuse me, I want to end with this statement that I've made before, and we can discuss it more later, that we need to be talking about, not about the youth, but to the youth. Because if we don't, then we can easily lose the next future generations of Muslims in North America. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So I'm done with my speech now.
So I have one comment actually. It's from Rahat Zaidi, and he's asking you to make a comment. And he says that the meetings should be freely in the mosque, in parentheses, Islamic rules. The supervised meetings are very limited, and without partition, mosque will provide naturally meet each other. So maybe rephrase a little bit, but he just wants you to make a comment on that.
Yeah, as I understand it, this is not a question, or more like a comment and asking my opinion. I used to do that, by the way. I remember in 1993, 1994, I would encourage the youth to come to the mosque with no partition. I'm talking about the old Bayview Mosque, for those who know Toronto, with no partitions at all, proper hijab, proper chaperoning, and it worked fine. In fact, we had a few marriages actually occur, but of course, people were highly critical to the extent that we then had to move those gatherings outside the mosque. But to me, as I understand it, people will be critical no matter what. You have to think not about what people say, but about the reality of the situation. Next question. And remember, I said at the beginning that if you don't ask questions, I'll continue talking. That will not be nice. So,
I have, sorry, go ahead. This is Najmul, but go ahead.
Okay, so there's another question here. When we looked at Khoja migration from India to Africa, and especially settled in Zanzibar, and started to adopt the local culture to the point that when our migration extended to Europe and North America, we still practice the cultures of Unguja, for example, like the language, the food like mandazi and Zanzibari mix and coconut muhogo and so forth and so on. So the question is, why has it been difficult for our elderly and parents here to accept when our children are inviting the North American culture and North American way of life?
yeah, that's an interesting question, but I think that the milieu, the environment living here is in many ways a greater challenge to our religious values because we're living in the West. It wasn't like that in, for example, in Zanzibar or in Mombasa, where the environment was amenable and suitable for maintaining our religious values. Our religious values were not as challenged, I would argue, in Africa or in India as much as they are challenged in the West today. Because we're talking of an environment where there are more Christians, more Jews, atheists, and so on. And the world has changed also. We're living in a liberal, secular culture, which is very different in its mindset from what was happening in Africa or in India. So we cannot really compare because the challenges here are so much greater. Therefore, we find that some parents, to some degree, they are right in resisting at least those values which are antithetical or those are against Islam. But sometimes they go overboard and anything Canadian or anything American is wrong to them. And we can't have that because, as I said, our youth are living here. They are not isolated in cocoons. They are integrating, they are assimilating sometimes with youth from different cultures, from different religious backgrounds, whether at school, college, university, workplaces, on the streets, and so on.
Nazmul Bhai, please continue.
I'm having technical difficulties. You guys can't see me. But the question I was going to ask you is, you talked about the LGBTQ community and, we have difficulty sort of even talking about it and accepting it. Are you aware of any communities, not just in North America, any Khoja or Muslim communities, not only in North America, but worldwide, who have accepted or at least are not hostile to them? I don't say we all are hostile, but you know what I mean. Our views, are they changing?
I am aware of certain mosques, at least here in Toronto, which welcome and allow openly gay Muslims, basically. And there are also advertisements for them. There is actually, when they have the gay parade, they have, na'udhu billah, they have a group called Al-Fatiha. Fatiha group or something like that, or alaq meaning the first chapter in the Quran, or this is the first revelation in the Quran, and so on. So there are what we may call a minority fringe groups. I've even heard of, I haven't met them, but I've heard of gay imams who openly perform gay marriages. So it is there. I'm not saying that it's making inroads, but the presence certainly is there, at least here. It's possible that they occur in different parts of the world, but a lot of these are what we may call under the carpet kind of stuff, which are not made public.
So can I go ahead and ask another question from Sister Shaheen
Go,
Ali?
go ahead.
So Sister Shaheen Ali is asking, is there any intra-faith dialogue to share mosque space with different Muslim sects and ethnicities?
Yeah, the question is there any intra-faith dialogue? There is some for sure. I know, for example, Imam Qazwini in Los Angeles has conducted, and I myself have participated in a few intra-faith. But the irony is this, that we Shias tend to talk more with Christians and Jews than with fellow Muslims. There is more interfaith rather than intra-faith. About 2-3 weeks ago, I was on this group with Al-Mahdi Group Institute in Birmingham. Again, it was done on Zoom. And what was interesting is that we were talking and dialoguing about the Battle of the Camel, the Jang-e-Jamal, with Sunni imams. And I think that was quite an eye-opener for me. That, well, we have obvious differences there, but at least we can talk and dialogue and discuss about some very, very sensitive issues and period of Islamic history. I would highly encourage for us to have engaged in intra-faith dialogue, because I find that many a time we are more misunderstood and discriminated against by fellow Muslims than by non-Muslims.
So there's another question there, somebody with an iPhone. It's saying that the youth nowadays are becoming more delusioned by the differentiation between Shia/Sunni, etc., and the huge emphasis our communities place on traditional customs and beliefs. But this is leading to a lot of conflict with the older generation, i.e. their own parents. How can this be addressed better? And what advice do you have for both generations that are being pushed further apart?
Yeah, it's a heavily loaded question, and I don't want to take too much time answering each question. I prefer more dialogue than monologue. But very briefly, I think that this kind of message has to come from the member itself. Is those who go on the member need to explain and talk about. I hardly think that we talk about this from the member. Beta group, which my brother Muhammad is running, talks about these issues, and you can see, for those who are members of Baitak, will tell you how controversial it has become to some degrees. But that's good. Controversy is good as long as we're talking about the issues. But I find that we hardly talk about these issues in the mosque. These are real lifetime issues that parents go through, that the youth go through, that there needs to be a conversation, a dialogue, a meeting of the minds, and explaining to each group where the border lines are, what they can and what they cannot do. How much can the parents accommodate, and how much they can try and understand the youth, and vice versa. It's a two-way street, by the way. It's not only that the parents have to give in, the youth also have to give in and realize that the path that they are treading on is acceptable or not acceptable. If it's not acceptable, why is it not so?
So while I continue reading the questions, if anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand or, write here in
Chacha
the chat
Pariani
window.
wants to ask a question. Sorry, Chacha, I can see his hand is up.
Sure. Chacha,
Chacha,
please unmute and go
unmute.
ahead.
Chacha is on mute. We cannot hear you.
Chacha, if you can unmute and go ahead and ask the question.
Can you unmute him or not?
I have requested an unmute for him, to him. Okay, while he's struggling with the audio, can I just go ahead and ask another question? It's a very short question from Bashir Versi. while what you are saying makes sense, the biggest question is who will bail the cat? Oh.
I think that honestly, it's time for very bold and courageous leadership from within the community. Yes, there will be resistance, etc. But as I've always said, we need to be looking at the community 20, 30 years in advance. If we don't act now, then we will continue suffering the consequences. So the leadership of the community, whether it's the religious leadership, the administrators of the community, many a time I find that many community leaders, the administrators or religious leaders, are fearful of the backlash because the minority is also the most vocal within the most communities, whether it is our community, Iranian or Iraqi or Pakistani, etc. So, you know, what has happened, for example, we look at the example of the Iranian communities. Because of their own particular background from where they came and many other factors, they have lost a large chunk of their youth. Most of the youth have gone outside the community. I remember that when we were when I was running the madrasa in Denver, Colorado, we had Iranians coming in and we would say, okay, fine, we have a madrasa. They said, no, we don't want the madrasa. We want you to teach our children Farsi. That's all they wanted. They didn't care about Islam, about the laws, nothing. They said, only teach them Farsi. Now, what does that tell you? And God forbid that we should be going towards that direction. Chacha is now unmuted.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
Yeah. Why Islam presented to humanity with full Arab culture, not without the Arab culture?
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think would have happened if Islam was revealed in China? Would have been Chinese culture, right?
Yeah.
Because that was the cultural framework in which Islam was operating at that time.
It is up to now. Yeah, I have to pray in Arabic. I have to have my name in Arabic. I have to have everything, even the dresses. If you see our Khoja, who is a Hindustani by culture, he will come with Sugramasi frock there, with top. You know what they call it, kanzu.
As I said, you have said before that for many Muslims,
Liyakat is full of Arab culture. You can't pray in your language, pray in Arabic. Your name is Liyakat. You are the great grandson of Nathani. You see, you should follow your culture. And instead of Liyakat, you should be elite.
yeah. Well,
Why Arab name?
well, the thing is,
What name has to do with Islam?
as far as prayers and the basics go, I would strongly argue for Arabic because we need one uniform language. Otherwise, we know you'll be praying in Kutchi and I'll be praying in Swahili and somebody else will be praying in Urdu. So we need one common denominator which unites us, at least in our prayers, in our basic rituals. I don't have a problem with that.
Unite us, you make us dumb. We don't understand what we are saying.
I think that it doesn't take too much of an effort to understand the prayers, at least. And even the Quran now is easily available in any language that we want to read in. But yes, in some of the things that we do, now, of course, we have even the Marthia in the vernacular. We have the lectures also in the vernacular. But things are changing, hopefully, for the better.
I hope so.
So I have an additional question here on what Chacha Periani has asked. So is it true that the Arabic language is such a vast language and therefore, Islam came into this language?
Let me be very clear. There is nothing holy about Arabic. Islam, the Quran, was revealed in Arabic because it was an Arab community. As I said, supposing Islam came in China or in India, do you think that the Prophet would have been speaking Arabic? No, because then people would have said, we don't understand what you are saying. Even when the Quran talks about Arabic, Inna anzalna al-Quran Arabiyan, we have revealed this Quran in Arabic. Why? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَفْهَمُونَ, so that you can understand. So there is nothing holy or sacred about Arabic itself. I remember, some people, we were talking about this in a conference. Somebody said, Al-Arabiya lughatul Jannah, that Arabic is a language of heaven. So at that point, somebody asked, well, what would they be speaking in hell then if they speak Arabic in heaven? Someone said Urdu, someone said Turkish, I don't know. The point being that heaven and hell, etc., there is no language there. We are talking at a different level, at a metaphysical level. Language is only applicable here. So there is nothing specific or sacred about the language itself. Yes, it is Arabic is the language of the Quran, but the Quran itself never says that Arabic is holy. It says we brought it in Arabic so that you can understand.
So the question was, go ahead, Chacha.
Even the angel have Arab names.
Because the Quran addresses them in that language.
Because the religion is created in Arabia.
So the question about the language was not on the holiness of the language, but the extensiveness of the language.
Okay, I appreciate that, yes. Out of every 5 Muslims, only 1 is an Arab. What does that tell you? In other words, 80% of the Muslims are non-Arabs. They don't understand Arabic. They don't speak Arabic. They may be able to read it, yes, but they don't even understand it. So to say that Arabic is an extensive language is simply not true. Most of the Muslims do not speak or understand Arabic. Arabic is mainly in the Middle East. Yes, you know, you have a few people here or there who can speak a bit of Arabic, but that doesn't mean it's anything special.
Nasir Jafar has a question. Nasir, please unmute
Also, I think
yourself.
Dr. Kimji also I can see.
So we'll give chance to Nasir
Kimji.
first.
That's okay, Dr. Kimji, go ahead.
It's okay, Nasir, you can go ahead since you're there.
Okay, so Liyakat, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Tell me something. With the ongoings and with the new scholars, the new generation scholars, they're coming up with amazing findings about how the Shia Ithnashri, as we believe in, has lots of flaws. Not only flaws, that it's taking us away from the reality aspect of submission to Allah. What are your take?
I'm not sure what kind of flaws you're talking about. And I think also I should just make it, we should not be too negative. We have made a lot of inroads, by the way, especially in the Toronto community, alhamdulillah. We have a lot of inroads. We should not be too negative. Yes, there is room for improvement, but I'm not sure what you mean by the flaws.
I mean exaggerations.
Again, that's a bit too vague. Exaggeration in what?
Exaggerations from the majalises, from our belief system, the way we believe the 12 imams as divinely, as universe having been created because of their love, so on and so forth. Well, I'm starting at very low stage, to be very honest.
So maybe a better word would be embellishments that we hear from the member.
I think ghulu is the right word. They use exaggerations. I stand to be corrected. But in addition, up to recently, one after another lectures, we hear that even the universe was created because of their love, so on and so forth. So since we were kids, we have been more geared towards the divinely guidance of Ahlul Bayt, more so than the Quran itself as a guide and headings towards Allah. And I don't think this is negative, personally. I'm just being straight, open, and the new generation scholars who might be in their 30s and 40s, I call them new generation because they are brave and they're coming out open to really find out with confusion, because we have our Ayatollah Shistani and others. From what I understand, when they're questioned, they resort more towards fiqh issues rather than the philosophy aspect of it.
Okay, we have only 4 minutes left, and this again a very heavy loaded question, but very, very briefly. We, at least in the Khoja community, have moved away from these naras and just embellishment on the members that we used to have for a long period. We know that, right? In the past, all our majlises were about the fadail, etc. And there's nothing wrong in the fadail, but sometimes yes, things did go overboard. But as Shia Muslims, we should follow the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Imams. In other words, whatever the Imams taught us, and they have told us very, very clearly, what the Imams have taught us, that when you receive our hadith, compare it with the Quran. And if you find that the hadith does not agree with the Quran, the term they use is throw it against the wall. Means get rid of it, disregard it. So whenever we get any kind of tradition or whatever somebody tells us, if we find it's going overboard, yes, we have to ask a scholar, because most of us are not experts in the field. But we, as a scholar, or any other scholar for that matter, has a responsibility to make sure that the message that we are giving across is not ghulu, is not an exaggeration, does not run contrary to the Quran, and does not even run contrary to reasoning. And yes, some of these hadith, I find them problematic, and I do not recite them because I feel that I'm responsible. When I come in front of you and speak, I have a responsibility in front of Allah, in front of the Prophet, in front of the Imams. So we have to be very careful in what we say. That does not mean that the Ahlul Bayt do not have fazail. Of course they do. The Imams are not divine. They are divinely appointed. They have extra knowledge, yes, but they are not divine. Because the moment you believe that the Imams are divine, then you've lost the concept of Tawheed. The Imams never ever claimed that they were divine.
I will pass this to Nazmul now, and then after that, if we have time, we can continue with the questions, and I'm sure Dr. Kimchi
Dr.
is right
Saab,
there.
can you stay on? I mean, you can see there are so many questions, and people are hungry for knowledge and your views. Can you stay on for maybe 10
I'm okay
minutes?
for a few more minutes,
Excellent, excellent. Maybe I can just ask a quick question. Alhamdulillah, we have so many more students now studying Islamic, taking Islamic courses, graduating in Islam, and really sort of moving forward in that direction. When do you think, because you are an academic and you are in that field, when do you think we'll have our Hausa in the West? Because that is really what we need.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. We can have a seminary, but I've always said that we need some seminaries in the West which are a mixture of the East and the West. In other words, a lot of what is being taught in the East, in the Hausas, in Qom and Najaf, is very valuable. Let's not make and a good scholar has to be trained there also. But at the same time, he or she has to be trained in the West. And this is another field that we need to look into very, very seriously. When the Jews came in the 1860s, 1870s, you know what they did? They established their own yeshivas, they call them, rabbinic schools, whereby they would train future rabbis, not in the Middle East, but in Cincinnati, for example, or in different parts of North America. That's something that we have not really done. I know there are some seminaries and Islamic colleges here and there, but many of them are just replicating what is being taught in Qom or in Najaf. And in that case, if they are teaching what is being taught there, I say, why don't you just send them in Qom and Najaf? It's much cheaper. But if we were to alter and change the syllabus to mix and match the two, then I think that we have a much better chance of creating future ulama who can cater for the needs of the present and future generation of Muslims.
Thank you. Hasnain, you have control of the chats and the Q&A, so can you?
Yeah, so we can allow Dr. Kimchi to ask a question. He wanted to ask one. If he's around and he can unmute himself, Dr. Hussein Kimchi, please. And while he's coming online, I don't see him there. There's another question. What is the Sharia ruling on gay marriages or being gay? What does Sharia say? Has this ruling changed?
Okay, I think we need to distinguish between a person feeling gay and acting it out. Okay, and this, I have confirmed this with many scholars, that sometimes a person may feel that inclination, or may feel that he or she is in a particular sexual orientation. That feeling can be natural, in which case you cannot blame a person. But acting it out is obviously haram. The actual act itself, the laws on the acting has not changed at all.
There's another question from Admin's Galaxy. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for the forum. What can be done on campuses to unite Shia organizations against Salafis?
The majority of the students on campuses are very moderate, I found. They are Sunnis, but they are not Salafis or Wahhabis. The problem is they get influenced by them. So they are easily swayed because these Salafis and Wahhabis are well trained, whether they're trained in India or they're trained in Saudi Arabia or whatever. And of course, now that you don't even have to go to India or Saudi Arabia, everything is on the internet. So I think it's important that we get our youth, we cannot isolate ourselves or our youth from others. But at the same time, we need to explain not only to our youth, but to other Muslim youth, that is non-Shia Muslim youth, about the problems and the issues regarding Salafism and extremism for that matter. A lot of this radicalization, by the way, you know where the radicalization really occurs? Not in the mosques, but it actually occurs on the internet, and in some cases on the campuses too. So this is, I think, that the best that we can do. I would also suggest here, and something that I wanted to talk about, I did not have time, but I've advocated for us to have chairs in Shia Islam in the universities. Today we have on different universities, Umar al-Khattab chair, Prince Faisal chair, Prince Abdulaziz chair in Islamic studies. We have only one Imam Ali chair in Islamic studies at Harvard, and even that is in a seminary, it's not in a university. It doesn't cost more than $1 or $2 million to establish a chair which can be taught by a Shia professor, and that is a permanent chair. In other words, if a person dies or retires, somebody else comes and occupies. It's ironic perhaps that I occupy a chair at McMaster, and who endowed the funds? He doesn't pay me, the McMaster does, but it's the Amir of Sharjah who has endowed the money for the chair that I hold, and he knows that I'm Shia. We've met. But that goes to show that why we need to, because when we have our own chairs, that we can teach our students and non-Muslim students and other Muslim students also what the true views of the Shias are. At the moment, the only thing that they know about us is that, we have another Quran and we believe the Imams are divines, etc. All these kind of very wrongful beliefs. I've always said that if you don't talk about yourselves, somebody else will. And what they say about us will not be very nice to hear.
Thank you. And there's another question which is connected to the comments about the Sunnis. And Sister Banu is asking, the issue of Sunnis are Muslims in this world and not in the hereafter. Is this being discussed positively now? And let Allah be the judge.
Yes, because after this recent controversy, which only occurred about, I would say, October 21st, so less than 1 month ago, Ayatollah Sistani, may God lend his life, issued a statement through his agent, totally condemning that view, that no, we don't accept this view, that Sunnis are Zahiri Muslims, not Batinis. Rather, we consider them not only our brothers but ourselves also, as he has said in the past. So he has come out very openly, and a lot of ulama condemn Kamal Haidari, although what Kamal Haidari said was not totally wrong, by the way, because it is there. And to be very honest with you, because it is there, he is available on the internet. Even Ayatollah al-Khoui used to believe that Sunnis are kafir in the next world.
So there's a connected question about the Hausa and seminary here. Brother Muslim is asking, do you think you will manage to guide the youth the way they should be without the blessings from Najaf and Iran?
I don't know why we should not have the blessings of Najaf and Iran. As long as we are not deviating or teaching something which is un-Islamic, I don't see why they should object to it. This, they might say that, yes, why don't you bring the youth in Najaf or Iran for we can train them. But as I've said, that there are certain issues there, whether it is cultural, whether it is the mindset, psychological, etc., which, and plus the fact that, we could be teaching them certain subjects which are not taught there. So one can argue that, we need this in order to teach our youth issues or subjects, topics which are not taught in Qom or Najaf. If we want to send them there, by all means, we can send them there, but also make sure that they also get the university education from here. You'll be surprised, by the way. I have to tell you this. You'll be surprised by the number of mujtahids I'm talking of, scholars who spend years in the Hausa writing to me today here in Canada, asking if they can study under me at McMaster University. Isn't it ironic? I said, you are a mujtahid. Why do you want to study here? He says, because we want to come and teach in the West. So the number, almost every week, invariably, I get emails after emails from scholars who are well trained in Qom and in Iran, in Najaf, writing to me. One of my own students actually studied for about 10 years in Qom. Now he's studying under me here. So that just tells you the need to connect the East and the West.
Nasmul, I'm passing it back to you now.
Thank you so much. So on that point, which should come first, study in Qom and then do, North American or Western education, or do the Western first and then go to Qom? Which would be better?
I don't think that there's necessarily, one way or the other. Whatever suits and more convenient for a particular person. In my case, for example, I did my master's first in Virginia. Then I went to Qom, and then I did my doctorate in England. So it was kind of mix and match. As long as the speaker or the alim is able to relate and connect with the community and with the issues at hand, I think that's more important rather than when and where he studied.
Excellent. I think it's time to wrap up. Dr. Takim, you've been very generous with your time. You gave us a lot of food for thought, some old ideas, some new ideas, and the dialogue continues. Hopefully, we will bail out the cat. We'll keep working on that.
But I hope, if I can just interrupt, I hope that we'll be acting on it, not just food for thought. It'll be action for thought.
Yes, one step forward. Yes, absolutely. Hasnain Kareem, thank you so much for helping out. I had technical issues here and I had to switch to my iPhone, so some challenges there, but these things happen. But I have Hasnain to keep me right. Secondly, Taki Ramtullah, again, thank you for letting us use your Zoom platform. Much appreciated. And just advanced notice, the next session, we have our repeat speaker. Rizwan Khalfan was with us, if I remember right, it was May or June when he gave, in the early days of pandemic. And at that time, he we had a good debate, not debate, but good discussion on COVID and how the economy will perform and, the government help and all that kind of things. 6 months, 8 months down the line, it's time to recap and see, where are we and where will we be in the next year, couple of years, So watch this space, you'll get the notification. And Dr. Takim, once again, thank you so much for your help.
My pleasure.
And taking the time to address us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And thank you all. Stay safe. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you, Liyakat.
Thank you. You're welcome.